Hello, everyone, and welcome once again. I'd like to introduce our guest for today, Alexa Stahl.
Thanks, Seb. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Awesome. So let's kind of warm up a little bit. I'd like to hear a little bit about your story, how you grew as a designer. Mike is yours.
Yeah. I mean, how far back do you want me to go?
Who was Alexa growing up? Let's start there.
Okay. Growing up. Well, I grew up in Wisconsin for the most part. Well, I technically was born in Massachusetts, lived there until I was about 4 years old, moved to Palo Alto, actually, and went to elementary school in Palo Alto from kindergarten through third grade. Then I moved to Wisconsin where I really grew up, and then eventually made my way back to California, back to the Bay Area when I wanted to go and study art and design school at a school in San Francisco. So, I guess like growing up though, I had a great childhood. I really had like a lot of good friends. I went to a really good high school. Like I have a lot to be grateful for. I think I had my fair share of like challenges too with just being a teenager and trying to navigate life things. But I think when it came to like school, especially, I didn't feel like I really was good at taking tests. I didn't really wasn't really good at like math or science, or at least I didn't feel like those were like the things that I was like doing like I was really good at. But I loved my art classes. I loved classes where I could do project-based work. I think actually one of my favorite classes in high school ended up being my AP psych class I took my senior year. We did a lot of experiments and it was more project based in that sense. So like ultimately when I was deciding what I wanted to do after high school, wanted to go to college, I've at least had the language, I think, or like kind of the mindset that I wanted to do something that was more maybe like art and design focused, something more hands on. And so, lucky for me, my dad's a designer. He's been a designer my whole life, product designer specifically. And so, knowing that I had those interests, he recommended some opportunities for me, or I guess career paths, which ultimately led me to being interested in studying graphic design. So, I went to college to study graphic design. I also went to college to play college basketball, and that was like a huge part of my life back then, and it was something that I was really aspiring to do. So I found a school where I could do both. Long story short, didn't end up wanting to stay at that college, so I spent 2 years there. Felt like I needed to hit like a big reset button and wanted to just start over. And my dad for most of my whole life, had stayed in the Bay Area. I grew up in Wisconsin, living with my mom. But I would go back and visit, and I would go back and visit him every summer. And so we still had like a great relationship, of course. But anyway, my dad recommended like, hey Alexa, if you really want to get into like an art and design major, you might want to consider going to an art and design school. So now I was at this point in my life, I was like super unhappy, like needing to reset. I remembered that. And that ended up bringing me out to San Francisco, where I ended up studying graphic design at an art and design school in San Francisco called California College of the Arts. And I graduated there with a BFA 2.5 years later in graphic design. And that's what launched my career ultimately in product design. But I guess that's a little bit more of a story as well.
Interesting. I find it very curious how the two classes that you pointed out back in high school or in elementary school was the AP psychology class and the arts class. And in a weird sense, that's almost what design or product design really is.
Yeah, AP Psych, like psychology, understanding people, behavior, like all that kind of stuff. Absolutely. I think, and then like when it came to like the art classes, like I remember taking like ceramics, like digital something where we'd be like spending time in Photoshop, manipulating photos and putting stuff together and all that kind of stuff. But I will say, I do strongly believe that art and design are different disciplines. They're both visual. They both help us tell stories. Like there's a lot of, I think they're related a lot in that sense, but they are technically different disciplines the way I see it. So I think that it was great that like art or like my art classes ultimately led me to my interest in design. And I definitely see how I definitely see how I got there and how other people could get there as well.
No, amazing. And then how did your career kick off whenever you started at Yelp and then Zendesk?
Sure. Yeah. So back at California College of the Arts, that's where I ended up studying graphic design, got my BFA there. I did a bunch of internships while I was in college. I probably did one, two, three or four, I think, before I graduated. And I also I was a transfer student into into CCA, and so I was ended up being a bit older than most of my classmates that were my studio classes because not all of my credits transferred. So I think it was a combination of that. Plus my dad and my stepmom at the time also told me that they recommended that I try to get a job that summer after my first 2 semesters there, that I should try to get a job in design. They really, having that support and just perspective really helped me a lot. 'Cause I don't know, you just don't think of that stuff back then. I feel like. So anyway, I did a number of internships in design. And actually, it was after my second semester at CCA where I took an interaction design class. It's an intro into interaction design 1 or something like that. That's where I discovered UX and product design. And that's where I was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do, which funny enough is what my dad does. And again, that's maybe another story. But I feel like I kind of discovered it on my own, which is cool. But then after I realized it's what he did, it was really, really cool. And I got a lot of good support from him. But yeah, internships. So I got a number of internships, like I said, while I was there. Many of them were at smaller companies or startups. But then it was the summer before my last semester at CCA that I got the internship at Yelp. And Yelp's a big name tech company, especially in the US. I was so excited. I remember when I was talking to the recruiter on the phone when they were offering me the job, running up and down my hallway, at the place that I lived, so excited, but on the phone, you couldn't I don't think the recruiter could tell, but I was running up and down the hall and I pause and mute it and take a breath because I was so excited. But that's what ultimately that internship, I had a really great experience. I had one more semester left. And then after I graduated, I had a job to come back and work at Yelp. So that's what really launched my full-time professional career in product design.
No, that's awesome. And then what got you interested in being a YouTuber and doing video content?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I think I started my channel, which is HelloImAlexa, where I make videos about product design, careers in tech, what it's like living and working remotely in San Diego now where I live. I've been making videos for about 5 years. And I started the channel for 3 reasons, really. And the main reason was, especially back then, I felt like I was given 2 specific opportunities. This is what I remember. I was given 2 specific opportunities back then to put myself out there, be on camera, and try to tell my story. And I got super nervous, and I totally flopped one of them. And the other one I said no to because I was just so nervous. And I was like, I have a lot to say. I have a lot of good ideas. I want to be someone who can confidently step in front of a camera and share my story. And so one of the main reasons why I started my YouTube channel was because I wanted to get better at public speaking. And what better way than to put yourself in front of a camera and talk at it and watch yourself back, listen to yourself back, than to start a YouTube channel and do that very often, weekly, if not every day. And so that was one of the main reasons. I also just loved video as a medium. I'd probably started a number of video projects before my YouTube channel, and this video project that really took off. Prior to that, just because I love the medium. I love how dynamic it is how dynamic the content is to tell a story, from video to audio to visuals to how you can layer on typography and all the things. So I love video in that medium. And then the third was, I remember back then I was trying to think, what if I'm going to start a YouTube channel, like, what am I going to talk about? And I, back then, especially, I was living in San Francisco. I was really active in the design community, going to a lot of events, hosting a lot of events myself. I was meeting with people all the time, all the way from even when I was in college. And so I realized, I was like, I'm telling a lot of the same stories. Like I'm getting a lot of the same questions from a lot of people I'm meeting up with for like coffee or tea or whatever. And it's like, it seems like I have a lot to say or I have a lot I could share that's related to my career, like this thing that I also am like really passionate about, which is design. And so that was kind of the third thing that all came together at the same time. It was like, I want to share stories about product design and careers. Like, I feel like I have a lot to say there. And then the sort of like bonus thing that happened around that time too is that I found a friend who was also really interested in starting a channel and getting more involved in video projects. And we ended up starting the channel together. And so I'm also someone who, whenever I can bring someone else into like my projects, my work, that will for sure help me, like gives me the energy to like make the thing happen. And so I think that push, like having a friend who was also interested in doing a video project, gave me that push to really get this thing going. And we did it together for a while and ultimately ended up doing our own channels. But it was also just really fun to have a friend who like wanted to do video back then also. So we did that together.
No, that's amazing. And there's actually something very interesting and powerful about video, in that video is the truest form of accountability. If you're trying to accomplish something, in your case, improve your public speaking, by recording yourself, you have essentially a time capsule of being able to go to the past and seeing how you've changed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, I mean, 5 years ago, I think I started the channel. It's like I'm 2018. I think that's right. I was a totally different person back then. And I'm not. Like, I both am and I'm not. Like, but it's really interesting to go back and look at past videos and see how I used to talk back then, or like how I used to present myself, or like what kind of topics I was interested in. And then you're getting older, so you look different. And then also, like, I've gotten a lot better at video editing and production. The technology's gotten better. So it's like so interesting to see how things have evolved over the last 5 years. And I have all the videos up. So, I mean, I don't necessarily go all the way back, because to me, like, it's a little bit cringy to like look at some of my videos from back then. I feel like I've gotten a lot better. But it's still all there. And I do hope that like some of those videos can still be helpful for people if they do come across them.
Yeah. Did you follow anyone's blueprint whenever starting your channel?
Blueprint, what do you mean?
Oh, as in you had like a YouTuber in mind that you really liked their content, you really liked their storytelling.
Gotcha. Interestingly enough, I did not watch a lot of YouTube when I started my channel. And once I did start my own channel, I became like a YouTube addict, or I'm like always on YouTube now. I'm always like, I've got a bunch of people I follow and I'm subscribed to. And I don't Google things as often as I YouTube things now. Like I'm like usually go to YouTube and ask questions and try to find a video that I could like follow along to figure out whatever question I have. But back then, no, like I really didn't feel like I knew a lot about YouTube. And it's funny because, I mean, even back then, there had been so much history to YouTube. Like YouTube, I think first started when I was either in middle school or high school, 2004 to 6 era, I think is when, I don't know. Don't quote me on that. We can look that up. But it's been like, YouTube's been around for a very long time. And I had no idea what was going on the platform, but I'm very well aware now. And I have a lot of people that I look up to and draw inspiration from.
What do you think is the best compliment that you've received about your videos?
Interesting. Good question. I don't know if there's like one comment that stands out, but one of the biggest drivers for me now with my channel is the connection that I feel like I'm getting from people all over the world who do leave me comments, or maybe they'll send me an email or reach out on Instagram and they'll say how my videos have helped them in their career or understand a concept and design better. Like that means the world to me. So I wouldn't say there's like one comment that stands out, but it's definitely a collection of all of the positive feedback and just feeling truly like I've been able to make a positive impact on someone's life that really inspires me to keep making videos.
And it's really interesting how in the way that you document your stories on YouTube, it shares a very both a practical but also personal side of your life story, your career. Uh, how do you think in 10 years time, whenever your child is old enough to look at your videos, how would your child react to them?
Yeah, I have totally thought about that. And actually, like a really long time ago, I wrote an article on medium.com. It's like a blog website where I was kind of reflecting on the fact that none of us, at least, yeah, none of us in this sort of like age range, maybe like I'm 31, and so like maybe plus or minus 5 or 10 years, whatever on each side. None of us are not on anyone older than me, and then maybe plus or minus 5 or 10 on the younger than me. We didn't really grow up with being able to have as much content documented about us and our lives when we were younger. So it's like the amount of baby photos that I have is I have some pretty small. I don't think I have any videos because I think we lost them in a flood. They weren't like uploaded online or anything. And so it's like we don't have those memories. But kids that are born today, oh my gosh, I mean, they're going to have their lives documented in not only like so much earlier on, but in like crazy amount. And like my son included, or my family included, because I love taking videos and I love taking photos. And so, anyway, I think it's just going to be such an interesting perspective for young people to be able to go back and look at that archive and understand their family's history. Hopefully be able to like learn and grow and be able to like, learn and grow from maybe some of the lessons that I've like shared online, or, maybe it'll be cringy and really awkward and maybe they won't want to look at them. Like, I don't know. I find some of those videos very cringy and awkward, but like, wow, what a like interesting perspective to have. And you think about like my kids, like, and they're gonna be able to look at these videos too, or like they're gonna also be able to like look at their family and their family history at this like super super like unique perspective to like what any of us could ever understand, because we just didn't live in a time where we were able to collect that kind of data, I guess, from our past. So it's an interesting thought experiment. I don't know what it's going to be like, but it's coming, like it's definitely coming.
Yeah, no, it's going to just overall in terms of the usage of technology. It's interesting to see how it has completely changed society in the especially with the whole concept of the attention economy, and how our attention has drifted and changed a lot. We listen to TikToks, but at the same time we listen to long form podcasts, and it's interesting seeing where like the sweet spot is for both of those.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And I do tend to enjoy making more long form content. And I think that long form content is also like quite different than the short form content. And so, yeah, just like depending on what type of creator you are, or like what kind of like what you're putting out there, could also just differ, like, yeah, what your mark in the digital footprint could be for other people to look back on. Yeah, it's very interesting.
So switching topics a little bit. So what are some of the most frequent questions that you get from aspiring designers?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people usually come to me asking for feedback related to their portfolio. If you're an aspiring designer, you know very well, and if you're a designer in the design community, you know very well that your portfolio is the number one thing that's between you and getting a job, which I think is actually really great. I think that it's cool that in our industry that there's this really objective way we can evaluate candidates to see if they can do the job, and that's through example projects and being able to go through a portfolio. So yeah, I feel like the most common questions typically come from from people who are trying to get a job, and often a lot of portfolio related questions.
Interesting. And how do you think the industry has changed since from 2019 till today, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic?
Oh man, I mean the tech industry has changed a lot, right? Like we were going into I was going into the office every day, and that was a part of my routine, and now I work fully remote, which I feel super lucky to be able to do. So that changes things a lot, from being able to see your teammates, or I guess like the company I work at, Zendesk, we used to have a globally distributed team. So I worked out of the San Francisco headquartered office, but we also had teams in like Dublin and Copenhagen and Singapore and Melbourne and like a number of other offices. And so we were always distributed. So I was always working with people who were based out of a different office or a different time zone even. And so we were kind of like working remotely in that sense. But now we're all distributed in a much grander scale, and even all over the US, all over places in Australia, etc. So, I mean, that changes the dynamic a lot. And that's not just specific to design. I mean, specific to design, I feel like we're seeing how the importance of collaborative software is really, really key to good communication and good collaboration when it comes to the like actual design work and like the output, and how we make sure that we can create good quality work, stay on schedule and within scope and all of that. But, like our job was on the computer before, at least the output of the work would end up on the computer. When it comes to early iteration work, I still find myself sketching out my ideas first. I like have Post-it notes usually all over my desk to write down my ideas. Like there's still a physical aspect of the work too, that I don't think has quite changed, but like the output of the work is still on the computer. So that hasn't changed. That part hasn't changed either. Yeah. I don't know. Do you?
Well, it's interesting because I do remember the one summer I interned in San Francisco in 2019, when everything was in person, everyone was meeting up in person. There were so many events happening. Every other day there was an event at LinkedIn, an event at Google, an event at Zendesk, and that sense of community was very alive. And that's the one thing I do kind of miss from working in person. But at the same time, if we're going to be working remotely and we want to scale teams throughout the world, being able to work from home is actually something that's pretty beneficial in certain cases.
Absolutely. No, it's a good point. And I used to go to so many events when I lived in San Francisco and before the pandemic and everything. And I loved that. It was so inspiring to, have a full day of work and then go to an event after work, grab a bite to eat or a drink, and then just like meet people in the community and be able to like talk and have interesting conversations and like listen to an interesting lecture or a speaker series, like all that kind of stuff. So I super miss that aspect of it. And I think there's been a lot of really great work to be done to try to bring people together in this new, like more distributed world. But there's nothing like meeting in person still. So yeah, I do share that similar sentiment.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think would be the trend moving forward? Do you think a return to office is going to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like I've seen, it seems like a number of companies are trying to move back towards like in-office work, like at least the big companies. Zendesk, where I work, we're currently not, there hasn't been anything announced in regards to like that happening. So I don't think that's going to affect my role necessarily. But I do see the benefit, and I do see why businesses, like it would be beneficial for the businesses to do that, especially if people are living in the city where they have an office. Like if Zendesk had a little office here in San Diego, because there's a number of people not on the design team, like just throughout the whole company that work out of San Diego. So like, I would love to go in like a couple times a week to like connect and see those people. It would definitely, I'd have to get back into that routine and figure things out. But I don't know. I don't feel like I have a clear perspective because I know it's not affecting me right now, but I can understand why it could be beneficial for companies and businesses to be thinking that way again, especially with their employees who live in the cities where they have offices. Because yeah, like we were just talking about with when it came to like the design community in San Francisco and connecting and being in person, like you get a lot done when you're able to, not only do you get a lot done when it comes to work, but you also just think you better understand the people you work with. And there's a lot of great benefit to that as well. That like interpersonal connection.
Yeah, no, definitely. And how do you compare life in general, moving from working in person in San Francisco towards now being remote in San Diego?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big shift in a sense. But again, I also moved here when it was, in the midst of the pandemic. So just like there was a lot of change going on. But the design community out here in San Diego, it feels a lot smaller. I also live in a coastal neighborhood, so I don't live like, in the city, like city center area. And so, maybe my perspective is different because of that too. Like I'm not living, like when I was living in San Francisco, I was like living in the city, and now I live outside of the city. So like maybe my perspective's different then. Like maybe I'd find myself going to a lot more meetups or like, I don't know, meeting more designers if I like lived in an area where there was more people around. But generally speaking, I can confidently say, just because tech is so big still in SF in the Bay Area, and it's a much smaller industry out here, that it feels different. So I've been trying to I actually hosted, excuse me, I've been trying to connect with people out here in the design community, and I hosted an event, I think back in December, which was really fun. And I kind of just put my feelers out and tried to see if anyone would be interested in just getting together and meeting up at like a brewery and connecting. And so I'm hoping to keep that little design meetup going and seeing if we can grow something really great out here too. But it's a lot less people for sure.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I've also tried doing some of those events. Not hosted, but gone to a few events in Dallas, where I live now, and
Yeah.
yeah, and it's very interesting how there's been a lot of people from other types of industries. Just a lot of people from finance, a lot of people from real estate, and transitioning towards building startups or doing something completely different to what it is. And to some extent, that's when they come into product design.
Yeah. Okay. You're saying, so like, you're also finding that there's just like so many people that are interested in breaking into design, and you're connecting with them now and you're seeing it in a different light being in Dallas. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The industries out here that are really popular, I know, are like biotech. So, I mean, that's tech, but there's like a lot of like medical, like the medical industry is really big. We have a really big military population as well. So even just like, I play a lot of basketball, and a number of people on my basketball team either were affiliated, like were in military before, or like when like their spouse was in military. And back in San Francisco, and like I played basketball for like 9 years up there. Like, I don't know. Yeah. Like I don't know if anyone on my direct team had any of that sort of affiliation. So yeah, it's been really cool and interesting to connect with like just a different group of people being down here.
Yeah, no, definitely. So let's say there's a 22, 23-year-old designer. They're looking to start their career somewhere. Where would you recommend them to go if they had the choice of going anywhere? Be it company, be it city? What do you think?
Oh, geez. I mean, I don't know if I could generally say anything, just because I feel like it really would depend on the use case. I work with people, I do design coaching. And so I think a lot of what I would recommend really would have to do with asking some questions back to whoever's interested and trying to figure out like what they need, or like what their goals are. San Francisco and the Bay Area is still a tech hub. Like that still is where a lot of people, that still is where a lot of startups are. There's still a really big tech community and industry there. Still a lot of designers there, although a lot of people have moved out. Like there still is a huge community there. So that could be a great place to consider. But there are also a lot of people moving to San Diego or Seattle or Dallas or Austin, or not a big city, like other areas or other places in the U.S. or otherwise. So it's hard to say. I think there are a lot of remote roles, right? So if you're finding that a lot of the jobs you're interested in are remote friendly, then that's great. But if you find yourself interested in a lot of roles and it does require you to relocate, then yeah, maybe consider relocating and, try out that path if it works for you. But, if you can't relocate, that's obviously going to make, that'll change things. As far as or as far as type of company goes, when it comes to working at like a really big tech company, a startup, an agency, all that kind of stuff, I think it also kind of depends on the person. If you work at a startup, the question is this a startup where you're the only designer? So is this your first design job and you're like leading design for this startup? Is that sort of the path, the career path that you want? Are those the experiences that you want? Like that's something to consider for a lot of people. That is like that. They want to. They want to have their hands in a lot of different, like hands in a lot of baskets and like work on a lot of different parts of building a product from scratch. So that experience would be great. Like if you want to go to work at a startup there, I think for the most part, at least for me, like when I was starting out, I knew I was really interested in like food and health tech. Like all of my projects, not all of them, but a lot of my projects back in design school were related to that industry. And so you'd think I'd like maybe want to find a job in that industry after I graduated. But I must have received some advice from my dad or my stepmom back then around this. But, I think instead of focusing on this much smaller group of companies that might be in this industry that I really like am passionate about, instead, like where my mind was like, I really want to find a team in a company that I feel like I can grow and learn the skills at. And later on in my career, I could aspire to and find that company that really matches the passion that I have for the specific industry and like, move into that position later on, where right now I know in my career, I really I need to surround myself with people who can help support me and grow my career. And that could mean finding a team or finding a company that has a team of designers that I could learn and grow from. But that could also mean like joining a startup where maybe I would be the only designer there, but like the product team, the engineers I'd work with there, I have a lot I can learn and grow from them as well. And so like joining a company where you can like really practice those skills early on and focusing more on like that layer and less on like, okay, I really love food and health, tech, I'm just going to apply to those sorts of companies. That's what I would recommend. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
So it's really interesting how everything's changed because back in 2019, to me, it was San Francisco or nothing, Bay Area or bust. Uh, but today there's Austin, there's obviously SoCal, there's Vancouver, there's Seattle, there's New York, and Miami as well has been growing a lot. And it's really interesting how there are a lot more options, and there's also a lot more that people have been thinking about in terms of how they want to live and how they want how like life might be a bit different depending on other places. Like life in San Francisco is completely different to San Diego, to New York, Seattle. And as for which company you're in, it's also interesting because from what I've talked about with a lot of people who work in FANG companies, they tend to have a lot of clout and a lot of big projects they contribute to. But at the same time, when they tend to work on smaller things, especially when they're starting up, versus at a startup, you have a lot more impact.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point too, right? So it's like, and then the question is too, like, do you want to help build a product from the ground up? Like, that might mean you want to work at a startup. Or are you less interested in that and you have these other goals in mind and, maybe going to like a bigger company, even as big as like a Google or a Facebook or what have you, like, they're, like you said, the projects you might work on there are more likely to not be building something completely from scratch. Like you'll probably be working on something that you're trying to move a specific metric, not even that much further along, but like it could end up being like a project where you're iterating on top of what something that already exists. They're both great opportunities. They're just going to offer different learning and growth opportunities, and they're also going to probably have different team structures and different types of people to learn from.
Yeah, no, definitely. So you mentioned that you do a lot of coaching. So whenever you're talking to one of how do you say like someone that you're coaching? What's the word for it?
I mean, just like a designer that I'm working with. Yeah,
Yeah, so that'd be a mentee, right?
sure. Although I think coaching and mentorship is different. So, mentorship, I think, in order for there to be a mentorship relationship, I think the relationship has to exist over a long period of time. So, if I were working with someone over 3 months, 6 months, I would consider that mentorship. But then in coaching, it's often more one-offs. So I'll meet with someone once or twice or a couple times, but we're not necessarily like meeting over a long period of time. So I wouldn't consider them a mentee necessarily, but someone who's like looking for recommendations or insight. So it's often designers because that's my background, right? But it's a good question. I like wonder what we call them.
Yeah, no, because English is my second language, so sometimes like there's like one word that I might
Yeah,
not know directly, but
no
so if you're
worries.
talking to one of these people, so how do you coach them whenever it comes to making a big decision?
Asking a lot of questions. I feel like often that's the place where it starts. Like I can offer recommendations and insights based off of my experience and the knowledge that I have in the industry and my background and all of that. But like, unless we get to the root of the problem or the root of like what exactly is that's, yeah, like not working or they're trying to figure out, unless you get there, like, I could just be I could be sharing information that might not be useful. So I think that's the number one most important thing to figure out. It's like, you have this question, but like, there's probably 5 more questions we can ask to like get you to get us to the point where you can really pinpoint what's going on for you. And that's both in just like career, it can also be portfolio related. I feel like a lot of the time people are coming, would come to me with like looking for feedback on their portfolio, but they haven't thought through like the specific questions that they have as it relates to their portfolio, and like being able to, again, figure that out, like what's not working for you. At what point is your portfolio, like what point in the interview process are you getting stuck? Are you not landing like conversations with recruiters? Are you making it wait all your way to the very last interview and you get stuck there? Are you getting stuck on the portfolio review? Are you getting stuck when you answer questions related to like XYZ? So being able to like really pinpoint what that thing is, I think helps me as a coach be able to offer the most relevant and like helpful feedback for someone.
Yeah, no, that's a very good strategy to do. Sometimes whenever you ask the right questions is when you sort of unleash something that inside the person where they know what the answer is, but they don't want to tell it to themselves sometimes.
Yes, absolutely. Exactly.
Yes. Now let's talk a little bit about the biggest buzzword in the industry, AI.
Hit me. What are you wondering?
So how are you adapting to the AI revolution?
To be honest, I haven't done much of anything really to like with AI. So I don't know how I can answer that. I mean, I'm aware and I've been listening to a lot of podcasts about like GBT, and I made my fair share of AI avatar photos, like, with I forget what the app was that made those, but, I've done all of that kind of stuff and I'm playing around with it. But I honestly haven't done a whole lot past that. And maybe I should be, but I also still just feel like maybe I'm holding on too much to wanting to like, create things myself and not give up, control to the robots quite yet. But that's kind of honestly where I'm at with it.
How do you think AI is going to affect the way that UX design is made?
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is going to probably affect all industries, and in design, it looks like probably more automatically generating interfaces and hopefully supporting designers to do their job, like do the work to think about how we can create the experiences we're creating more thoughtfully, more human centered. You know, it's possible that just like other industries, that aspects of design and design work could, you know, could be taken, the role, that job to be done could be taken over by a robot. I don't know, maybe even just thinking about the sort of website builder products like Squarespace, Wix, even Webflow. Those are like, you know, website builders that have made things easier for people like designers or even non-designers to build a website, you know, without having to consider or be as technical and like have to code it themselves. So it's like perhaps some of those tools also, or perhaps AI will make some of those tools, you know, easier for people to create and not need a designer. But I think that there's always going to be a role for design, and especially when it comes to creating like a really personal experience, really like telling a story, like that, all that kind of stuff. I still think it requires that human touch, and I believe that it will still, there will still be a lot of jobs to be done for designers to help make that come to life.
Yeah, no, definitely the human touch element is something that I think will still be needed, especially as a lot of the big AI projects, they're still very new, and we're still looking to understand the ethics and the morality
Mm-hmm.
behind the AI.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know, what's interesting too is like, I'm not personally working in AI, like design or product work, but there's going to probably be a lot of new interaction patterns and rules and principles that will be really interesting to, you know, see evolve over the next decade. Just like when, you know, like our smartphones came out, there was a lot of new interactions that came with that too. A lot of the like, you know, how we interacted with our phone, the feedback we'd get, the vibrations, the swiping, the ways we would swipe, the interaction methods that we, you know, we'd swipe on the phone, like all that, that was all new back then when the smartphones came out. All those patterns and principles and interaction concepts were new. So, I mean, I think similar to that, we're going to see that also happen with AI, and it's going to be really cool and interesting to, you know, yeah, to learn and grow as a designer, like within this time in the world.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think would be a concern that you have with AI?
Yeah, I guess I don't want like to live in a virtual world my whole life. Like I don't know, like the sort of metaverse world freaks me out a little bit, honestly, because I don't know. I love like Black Mirror and shows like that on Netflix, and they're very Black Mirror is very dystopic, but it's like it could get that way if we aren't intentionally designing like digital products, or you know, designing our lives to avoid that sort of outcome. And so I hope that, you know, we can continue to be really thoughtful and intentional about how we create in the next few decades, so that we can, yeah, just we can also, as much as we'll evolve and change, we can also still remain human and have similarity, like be the same in a sense too.
No, I find it really interesting that you mentioned Black Mirror, because I think that for a UX designer, that is such a fascinating show in
Yeah.
how they think of the most dystopian ideas, and they basically create technology out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Did you know that Black Mirror, it's like the it's named after your phone screen, the black, it's supposed to be like, yes, so your phone screen, when it's like, you know, when it's black, it's, and you can like see yourself in it, that's the Black Mirror. Crazy, right? Very cool concept. Yeah.
No, one time I interviewed for a startup, and one of the interview questions was to essentially, you know, like how in the design interviews there's like a prompt like design an ATM for kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Or yes, I love yes. I had one of those in school actually, an ATM related design project
Yeah, so one of the questions was to create the most dystopian, Black Mirror-esque idea.
with an ATM machine. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Got it. Oh my goodness. Interesting.
Yeah, and you've had to follow like all the design process for it and the whiteboard and like how do you create the biggest like nightmare scenario that there is.
Oh my God. That sounds, I mean, that's like both so fun and also like so horrible at the same time. I'm sure it'd be like so interesting to like review all of those projects.
It'd be a really interesting video actually. You get like five designers
Yeah.
and just brainstorming dystopian ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Idea for another time.
Yeah, and then in five
Nice.
years time they're all made.
Yeah. And then like it actually, yeah, exactly. Oh my God. 5 years later. Hopefully not. That's so soon.
No, that's amazing. So, you've obviously talked with a lot of designers, you've talked with a lot of people in the industry. What advice do you have for aspiring designers, someone who's maybe 18, 19 years old?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I think especially when you're starting off and you're learning, you're in like learning mode. Okay, I could take this a couple ways. One like technical thing that I think is really important is when you're learning design, try to make as much try to make as much as you can. Like make it your own. Like there's a lot of really good templates out there, and there's a lot of really good you can integrate a lot of other people's work into your work now. But I think when you're like learning and you're trying to like learn, hone in on your craft skills, I would really highly recommend trying to figure it out first yourself to try to make the thing before going and using a template. So that's like a technical thing. And then also when you're starting out, I don't think this is like any different to any other industry necessarily, but talk to a lot of people, ask a lot of questions, be a sponge, connect with a lot of people. A lot of like getting a job has to do with that. And I think what's especially cool about the design community is that people are so interested and willing to help and like wanting to connect. And so that's what I would recommend if you're starting out.
Yeah, and why do you think people in the design sorry, I'm just gonna repeat that again. Uh, why do you think that so many people in the design industry are so willing to help each other out?
It's a good question. I don't know. Like I personally, I personally just like love helping people. Like I get a lot of energy from it. So like I wonder if that's like that's partially just like my personality. But it's true. It's like in the design community, people really want to help. And maybe it has to do because like a lot of our job is understanding people and empathizing and trying to design software that's, for people so that they can, improve a job to be done or, do something easier or do something that, is helpful for them in their life. And so it's probably inspired by that. Like we're constantly thinking about others and, in a sort of meta sort of way, like what does that look like on careers and industry? It's like, we want to help people like advance in their career. And so I think, and from there, it's probably just like a cycle. Like I had a lot of people who helped me early on in my career, so I want to give back and do the same for others. So we probably just like it probably started with this is just kind of like the mindset we're all in, and then yeah, once you get help from someone, it becomes a lot more innate. I feel like that you'd want to help someone else, and so here we are.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, but I think there's actually something else in there.
Tell me.
And I think that's because a lot of people in design, they come from very abstract backgrounds. So in my case, my background is in psychology. But because one thing led to the other, I ended up being a UX designer. Uh, and because there's so many people that have different backgrounds, I think they all deep down relate to the fact that at some point they had to pivot in their careers. and move
Interesting.
towards a different industry.
Yeah, that's interesting because like I don't have that same background. Like I went to an art and design school. But you're right. I think in general in tech, that's a theme. Like there's a lot of people who come from other industries and like end up getting a job in tech through like discovering it later on. And then, yeah, you're right. Like bringing out all that kind of like past perspective from the other roles and positions they had, just, yeah, kind of helps you connect to other people who are trying to do the same thing in a different sort of light.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And then, so to wrap up, what is something what is like your biggest goal for this year in terms of your career, your channel, etc.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. If you were asking me this last year, I'd have a totally different answer. But I'm 2 months away from giving birth to my first child. So I am in a totally different mindset this year with my career. I'm very much, and I knew that going into wanting to become a mom and sort of like planning for this next phase that I was like hustling and doing a lot of work, especially last year that was career focused. And knowing that becoming a mom was kind of this next phase, I knew my priorities were going to kind of shift a bit. So, to be honest, this year is not a big career focus for me. I'm trying to, you know, work my best on the projects that I have at work and the amount of time I have left before I take my leave. I I was actually super lucky or super grateful. I got to take a sabbatical away from work for about 6 weeks earlier this year, where I wanted to work on creating intro into design class. So the first ever class I was going to create and publish and offer for people interested in careers in design. It was a huge project, so I did not finish it. And so I'm going to try my best to see how far I can get with it this year. But again, it's not as much of a priority for me as it is just going to be being a mom. And then, so really this year, I think it's a lot of just trying to go with the flow. I'm going to still continue to try to upload videos on my channel about design and in my life as much as I can. But I'm about to enter this phase where I don't know what's going to happen. There's going to be a lot of change. I'm probably going to be really tired, especially early on. There's been a lot of changes in my body already. And so I'm trying to just let go a little bit and give myself that grace, because especially in the creator community, you hear it a lot. You get burnt out, and I don't necessarily feel like I've gotten burnt out, but I've definitely gone in waves of feeling more confident and less confident in what I'm creating and what I'm making, and how useful is it for other people and all that. So I think it's important that this year I'm kind of just giving myself that grace, slowing down. I'm going to try my best to keep creating content with whatever makes sense for where I'm at in life. But that's kind of just the honest truth of where I'm at right now in this phase of life. And I do hope that anyone who does follow along is still interested and can get value from the things that I'm making.
And how does it feel to become a mother?
I'm beyond excited, honestly. I was saying, I think earlier in the show, I've always known I'd wanted to be a mom. I was one of those kids who was always dreaming of that. And so it's just wild to think that we're here, it's 2 months away. And so, yeah, I just I'm just really excited, trying to be really thoughtful and intentional and kind of go into being a mom too with a design perspective. I think once you become a designer, you can't not see how design can just make such a positive impact on all aspects of your life. And so trying to just be really intentional about everything with this new phase in life, and also just knowing that it's going to be a huge learning opportunity. There's a lot of unknowns. As much research that I do going into it, there's also going to be just things you can't really prepare for. So yeah, and I like that. I think that variety is also exactly what I'm looking for right now.
No, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here, Alexa, and I wish you and your husband best wishes.
Yeah, thanks, Seb. I really appreciate the opportunity too, and super excited that you're doing this project. So happy to be a part of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.